welcome to the regular meeting of the Wooster City Council scheduled for this Monday, August 21st, 2017. I'm glad Eclipse Mania is over. We have come back from our 6-week hiatus, and I know everyone's here ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work. It's after 7:30 p.m. Just as a note, because of the Labor Day holiday, the next regular meeting for City Council will be Tuesday, September 5th, 2015. Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Ansel?
Here.
Mr. Cavan?
Here.
Ms. Knapka? Here. Mr. Myers?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Silvestri?
Here.
Mr. Albright?
Here.
We have a full complement of council members, so we do have a quorum. The agenda will remain as presented. I will note that we do have an executive session at the end of the legislative portion. This time, I would ask you to stand and join the members of City Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
What is that? What's it mean?
And I should point out that the Wellards have put in additional microphones, so hopefully our rebroadcasts will be a little bit more clearer in what people have to say. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the circumstances. But thank you very much, Carrie, and your husband, wherever he's gone to. I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the July 3rd, 2017 council meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Silvestri to approve, second by Mr. Ansel. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those minutes are approved. Communications from the mayor. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Beitendijk, and welcome, Council. I hope you had a good hiatus through the summer. I know we enjoyed a bit of a break, so hopefully you all got refreshed also. Some great things have happened in our community since last we got a chance to visit. You knew that we were being considered to be one of Ohio's best hometowns by Ohio Magazine. Well, on July 24th, they did announce that Wooster is one of the 2017-2018 Ohio best hometowns according to Ohio Magazine. So this is when we had won it back in November of 2006, the magazine that came out with the front cover and also stories in there. They are going to do a very similar type of expose on our city that'll come out in this November magazine. And then I think we'll have 3 different issues where we'll be featured along with the other 4 winners in Ohio. They pick 5 winners each year, 1 in each quadrant of the state, so northeast, northwest, southwest, southeast quadrant. We are the northeast quadrant winner, and then also a central location. So it's truly a high honor for our community. We're real excited. We're trying to plan some activities and celebrations about that, and we are working on that as we talk. So if you have any good suggestions or would like to offer some ideas, please let us know on that. So another nice thing is on the August 14th, our police department started operations out of the Safety Service Center. So we are fully moved across in the police department, and the fire department moved the administrative team today, and tomorrow I think the trucks are coming over from Station 2 up to the new station. So by the middle of this week, they will be fully operational on the fire side. So we will be fully in operation. We are very appreciative to both the police and the fire team that worked very hard to design the building to our needs, and also Joel and the engineering team for sort of ushering through the whole process. And also JGJ was our general contractor, and by everything I've seen, they did a fantastic job for us. So great news. We are planning an open house for council before the September 5th meeting, if that suits your pleasure. Hopefully we can get up there an hour or so before the meeting and let you see the finished product there. So that's great news. One thing, I don't know if you've heard or not, but it's also quite an honor. There's a group called the Ohio Conference of Community Development, and they sent a letter saying that they are pleased to inform us that Jonathan Millay was voted the 2017 Young Professional of the Year, and that award was presented to him on July 26th. So also a real honor for Jonathan, but also a star in our community's corner just for having Jonathan as part of our team. So another good thing. And one final piece that I'd like to tell you about is you've heard of this award in the past, the FDI Award. It's an Economic Development Award done by Financial Times, which is part of the London Times. And we've won it for twice, one in 11 and 12, and then 13, 14. We were notified that Wooster again has won the FDI Award for the American Cities of the Future. So that's going to be presented in Toronto in mid-September. So lots of nice accolades coming towards our community, and it's fun to be able to share such things with you. I know we've got a busy agenda for council tonight. We are here to help assist those conversations, and glad to have everybody back and moving our city forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a petition this evening. It's a liquor license renewal. If you would please read that, Mr. Paulo.
Ohio Division of Liquor Control for the Bell Stores, Inc., doing business as Bell Stores, 2424 Akron Road, Worcester, Ohio, 44691. It's a renewal of a Class C2.
And as you noted on our agenda, that's the Citgo station at the corner of Portage and Akron Road. As you know, we have three options. We can have a hearing, request a hearing here in the city, request a hearing down in Columbus, or waive having a hearing. So what's your pleasure, council? Ms. Knappich?
Move to waive hearing.
Motion to waive hearing by Ms. Knappich, and there's a second by Mr. Albright. Would you please call the roll on the waiving of the hearing?
Hansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Knappich,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Albright.
Yes.
And we will waive the hearing. If you would, Mr. Paulo, send them an epistle telling them that we are waiving our hearing. Communications for the public. Now, I'm going out on the limb that the two people that signed up are from AEP, and they're going to want to speak on item number 3 on the annexation, and I talked to Ms. Knappich, who will be presenting the legislation, and she would request that at the time that is brought forward tonight, that we'll give you the opportunity to speak then, since it will be more in conjunction with the ordinance that's before us. I guess it's a resolution before us. Committee reports, I don't think we've had any committee meetings since we last met. And tonight we do not have any public hearings, but we will down the road. At least one I know of will be for that alley vacation. And the old businesses, I assume the alley vacation ordinance will remain on the table, since we have to advertise for 6 consecutive weeks. And the problem with what happened was Normally, we have all the property owners sign the vacation request. In this case, one property owner didn't. When all would request it, we don't have to advertise for 6 weeks. So I think that we kind of got sideways or sidetracked because normally we never have to advertise. So that's what's going on with that. So we'll consider the alley vacation of Maiden Lane to Maple Street to be tabled until the advertisement takes place, or until such time as the petitioner gets the other party, property owner to sign the petition. And rolling right along brings us to the first item of new business, which is amended ordinance number 2000-72. It'll be presented by Ms. Knappich, slated for 3 readings. Before I get to Ms. Knappich, if you would, Ms. DiPaolo, please read the title of that ordinance.
Amended ordinance number 2000-72. An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Wooster, Ohio by establishing regulations for employees who serve in the National Guard or reserve components of the armed forces.
Ms. Knappich, the floor is yours. I see you're going to be a busy person this evening.
Yes, I am. This first ordinance that we're bringing forward today is regarding some medical National Guard or Reserve folks of the armed forces that we may have on our staff. And there is specific law, federal and state law, that applies to the leave that should be granted to the military personnel who work for the city. As you know, reservists have to take weekends and two weeks during the year, and as they have decreased the number of people in the military, they've been calling up reservists more. Now, federal law is the Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Act of 1994, known as USERRA. And in reviewing our ordinances covering this, we found that we had some inconsistencies. So what we would like to do is, rather than make it as specific as the last ordinance was, that we simply put that the municipality, of Worcester, will provide lead in compliance with all the applicable federal and state rules. That way, Jeanette, who I will ask to address this as well, can draft policies as the state and federal laws change so that we can remain and continue to remain in compliance. Jeanette, would you like to further address this, please?
Sure. But the primary reason that we're asking for this change is because the current ordinance that we had, as you had mentioned, was in conflict, and that was discovered when we had some employees that needed to utilize this particular ordinance to be off on leave, and there were some conflicts with what USERRA allows them to take and what the ordinance indicated that they could take. So we're just asking for that to be in compliance with federal law.
Thank you. So it's pretty simple. It's just bringing our ordinances in compliance with state and federal law.
Well, and that makes sense it just reads so rules or regulations are promulgated instead of every time there's a change, and God only knows there's enough of that we have to come back and amend it. So.
Exactly. To rewrite our ordinance this way gives Jeanette and our HR department more flexibility to adapt to the federal and state laws faster and more efficiently.
Any questions or discussions? It seems pretty straightforward.
I'm going to then move to suspend the rules on this one.
All right, motion to suspend the rules by Ms. Knappich, second by Mr. Albright. Would you please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Ansel?
Yes.
Cavan?
Yes.
Knappich?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
And Albright.
Yes.
The rules have been suspended. Ms. Knappich.
Move to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Ms. Knappich. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Silvestri. Would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Ansel?
Yes.
Cavan?
Yes.
Knappich?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
And Albright.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2000-72 passes. Ordinance number 2017-23. Again, it will be presented by Ms. Knappich. It's also slated for 3 readings. Before I get back to Ms. Knappich, would you please read the title, Mr. Paulo?
Ordinance number 2017-23, an ordinance amending Chapter 163 of the Wooster Codified Ordinances with respect to part-time and temporary employees, Sections 163.02 and 163.04.
Ms. Knappich, the floor is yours.
Yes, this is a similar type of ordinance. This addresses our part-time employees, and right now, we kind of looked at our part-time employees as being 20 to 30 hours a week. And the ACA defines part-time employees as 30 hours and less. And so there are some changes, and actually in Attachment A, there are quite a few pages and changes here that would be established in order to bring us in compliance with the federal ACA. And I hope you've all had a chance to take a look at that and see how it would affect our part-time employees by bringing them in compliance with the ACA. And I wanted also to give Jeanette a chance to address this one as well.
The primary reason for the ordinance change is currently right now, our ordinance defines part-time as there's 2 part-times, less than 20, and then greater than 20 but less than 40. And the way the ordinance reads today, if you work greater than 20 hours, you're eligible to purchase our health insurance at, for the ordinance, a self-pay rate, which is 100% of the premium. So if you have a part-time employee that you hire that works greater than 30 hours under ACA, we're required to make that insurance affordable if they work greater than 30. But the way the ordinance is written today, it is in conflict with ACA because we are saying in the ordinance they pay 100% of the premium. If they work greater than 30 hours, we have to make that affordable, which is significantly less than 100%. So we're asking for this adjustment so that we can become compliant and change our plan.
And as I understand it, so far, we have had no employees take advantage of that option to self-pay, correct?
That is correct, and actually, I believe I've asked finance to go back and look at their records as well, and as far back as they maintain records, we do not have record that anyone has ever utilized this benefit.
So even without the ACA, it probably was, it was a part of ordinance that was never used, so it really wasn't ever necessary either.
And we have a very minimal amount of part-time employees. We, on average, since I've been here for the past 5 years, have 2 to 3 part-time employees on staff. It tends to be a very limited basis, and most of the time we have used part-time staff to help if a full-time person maybe has an unexpected illness and maybe they have a unique skill set. We may bring someone back on a part-time basis, but it's typically been limited to just help bridge the gap until our full-time employee has medically recovered and is able to come back. There's a few other situations where the part-time person works less than 20 hours a year in some cases.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, comments? Again, this is more of a housekeeping and catching up to the changing times there in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I just received this today. It's multiple pages of changes, and if possible, I'd like to have it left on first reading.
That's fine, we can do that.
So we'll consider ordinance number 2017-23 as having its first reading. Brings us to resolution number 2017-37. This will be presented by Ms. Knappich. It is slated for 3 readings. And as I pointed out, we have some folks from AEP here. But before we get to Ms. Knappich, again, Mr. Paulo, could you please read the resolution's title?
Resolution number 2017-37, a resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city to enter into an annexation agreement with Ohio Power Company in Worcester Township.
Ms. Knappman,
Thank
floor is
you.
yours.
This is an annexation, and it's coming before us in a little different way, but a completely legal way than what we've seen them come before us in the past. Previously, it's gone to the commissioners, then it's come to us, and frankly, it's, this is the first time I've seen this, but Ohio Power is utilizing their ability under revised code 709.021, 709.022, and 709.129, which allows them to pursue excuse me, an annexation of property through agreement of the parties, which would include Ohio Power, the City of Worcester, and the Worcester Township trustees. And then once that is entered into, and then it would go back to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners would, without a hearing, enter into a journal resolution granting that annexation. So it's a different process than what we've seen before, but the revised code allows that process. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll let our guest from Ohio Power speak.
Yes, and my name is Tom Scanlon. I'm one of the attorneys for Ohio Power, and I have with me today Nicole Burgana, who's a representative of Ohio Power. As stated, we're here today seeking approval for the mayor to execute the agreement, which is referred to as an annexation agreement in the statute. And Ohio Power acquired this parcel. It's about an 89.5 acre parcel with the intent of developing a new service center. So Nicole's here today to answer any questions you guys might have about Ohio Power's plans. If you guys have any questions about the annexation, I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
I do have one. You've already approached the Worcester Township trustees, and they're in agreement already?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
I'm just curious, why approach it this way? I mean, instead of using the normal procedures that we are more commonly used in terms of annexation, I guess I'm a little bit suspicious in terms of why we've got why you guys want to turn this around this way versus doing it the other way.
With the procedure being available in the statutes, it's relatively new. It seems like it hasn't been used often. However, we thought it best to work through this procedure and approach city representatives and township representatives on the front end and see if we can do this. We thought it would be in the best interest of all involved.
This is actually a quicker process, is it not?
It can be. There are time limitations built within the statute, so it still does have some time restraints built into it.
David?
Would you like to describe maybe the details of the service center and what customers can expect? Is this going to be a place where there's workers going in and out, or is it simply a piece of infrastructure that's going to be kind of static in nature?
Yes, absolutely. That's what Nicole's here for today, is to describe those plans.
Right, so at this point, the plans are to build approximately 45,000 square foot facility that would be grand metal facility, and we would access off of Long Road for the main access point. And yes, it would house employees. There's currently a service center over on Freelander Road. So that facility is there, and those employees would be moving to that facility, which is approximately 40 employees. There would be offices there, also service garages, such that if there was a need in the area for service, they could be dispatched.
Does this mean if there's a power outage, we get a faster response and solution?
We hope.
And if I could ask, what are the future plans of the installation at Freelander Road?
Yeah, at this point, we don't have any plans to close that facility, but I don't know what the future plans are.
So it will remain operational?
Correct.
And then from this point, you would have to go before the planning commission, correct?
Yes,
Still.
there's a planning commission hearing scheduled this Wednesday at 5:30
Okay.
p.m. And that's for the zoning recommendation related to the annexation.
And that would be manufacturing, the
M2,
zoning?
yes.
M2.
And from our review of the zoning map and some of the properties in the area, we it would be bordered 92 on the north. There is a sliver of residential that would be on the western boundary.
Right, along the road.
But for the most part, generally, it seems to be transitions from one to the down to this area that is the Ohio Power facility would be.
We'll
Mr.
still have to
Holgren?
do the legislation to accept the zoning, like at the end, like we normally do, the recommendation.
Would you repeat that, please, Ms.?
We will still have to do one more piece of legislation on our end to accept the zoning, whatever the recommendation was, because it has, the map has to be changed,
Correct.
so. But they avoided a hearing with the commissioners by doing this method, but they bought themselves sort of a trip here to.
Looking at the map that came with the materials here, it appears that we're talking about these residential properties that are on the east side of, no. I'm trying to get the map for this arrow here.
Guyer's Chapel, east side of Guyer's Chapel.
North is this way? Okay, yeah. So it's on the east side of Garris Chapel Road. These are all residential properties right here from Long Road south.
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering, is there any buffering that's going to occur on your, because this huge area, kind of a triangular shape, kind of a rounded on one end, hypotenuse is kind of rounded. That's the railroad track, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering if your intention is to put some kind of buffering at the rear of these residential properties to buffer them from your M2.
Yes, we typically do that, and that's something obviously that we could work with whomever to do, but that's typically something that we do make sure that we have some sort of buffer to make it aesthetically pleasing.
Now, is there an opportunity at the planning commission, I would think, for the residents there to come to that meeting and be informed about this decision to this plan of buffering?
Yes, there is, and I just received the final packet from the planning commission, and there was a letter there to the residents, so notice did go out with information about the hearing, and I think our application was sent.
So all these property owners here have been informed by letter, and they could choose to come then to
It's
the
my
meeting?
understanding that they have been informed, yes.
Okay, I see Joel shaking his head.
Everybody within 200 feet of the site, yes.
Yeah, on any zoning change, that's standard
What's
practice.
the nature of this kind of odd-shaped intrusion from the railroad tracks north? It's in the middle of this 89.510.
Oh, okay, so that's a current station site that we have already, and we will be leaving that in the township, so that portion will not be annexed.
Okay, so you own that, but the line going, the print is so fine on this, and my eyes aren't getting any better. So basically, that kind of, it's kind of a rectangle with a little notch in it. That is, you own that too, but that is outside, it's a dark line, so that's outside the annexation. Okay. What are the plans? Are there any structures on that piece of property now?
There's currently a station on that property.
A
And
sta-
that will- a station.
Station?
Yes. A transformer,
Oh, okay.
everything, yeah.
Was
So
there
that
any,
will stay.
was there any reason that was left out of the annexation?
Just to try to work with the township and leave something in the township for, their, income.
Okay. Kind of a compromise.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess one more question. Do you have like a standard buffering, a certain amount of trees, shrubbery? Do you have like a standard formula that you
No,
use?
I don't think there is, I can't speak on that, I'm not with facilities, I can certainly reach out and try to get some information that way. However, at this point, I'm not certain as to where on the property specifically this service center will be built. I know that I have the plans and I can show you what the facility will look like, but I don't know, it may not even be that close to those residents, to be honest. It's 89 acres, so it could, I think our goal is to try to put it all the way to the east
Yeah, I'd be curious to know where exactly in the remaining 89, in other words, you're going to be going, you figure it's to the east near the railroad track.
Correct.
Okay. How far, Joel, this is a question for you, how far away does the building have to be, and that eliminates the buffering, or is the buffering always there?
I don't know the setbacks by heart, but obviously our zoning code has required setbacks and buffering and landscaping buffers to be put in there.
Will
This
that
is
be-
just for the agreement up front. I mean, it still has to go to planning commission, it still has to come back to you to
Okay.
accept the
So the
zoning.
planning commission can kind of add their 2 cents worth this Thursday,
That's
right?
exactly what the word.
Okay, thank you.
And we've had this issue as far as buffering goes before in that general area that we've addressed here at council, as I recall.
I know
Because-
Brass Font, we
Yeah.
dealt with that.
Right, so I think that, you know, we've usually been able to come to a decent resolution. Now, at planning commission on Wednesday, will you be presenting a schematic of your building and all of that?
As part of the application, we did submit a 5-page plan that has the schematics of the building and what the engineering will entail and sort of information it has.
Okay, great, great.
Any plans to develop the portion that the building won't be sitting on?
I don't know which name.
Well, I assume you're not taking up, you just said you're not taking up all 89 acres. So,
So we're going to develop other facilities.
well, I didn't know if you were going to put it, had plans for additional buildings later on.
No, not at this time.
So it's just going to be vegetation or,
Correct, at this time, there's not.
are you leasing it to a farmer now or?
There is a bonus on it now, but I think that's going to go away for the most part unless he agrees to continue that lease on the area that's remaining.
Yeah, and I'm not in construction like Mr. Sanders, of 40,000 square feet, how many acres is that going to take up?
Not 89.
Yeah, I think we determined that now.
I think Joel got his calculator.
Yeah, less than an acre.
Less than an acre.
Less than an acre.
So there'll be a lot
43,560
of
square feet in an acre.
vegetation.
So that'll be
a
a-
lot of campus area, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Still a lot of deer.
Still, well, I know I live out there, still a lot of deer. Yeah.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the facility on Friedlander Road. I mean, you had said you're gonna keep that operational, do you have a timetable? Is that only gonna be operational until the other one is up and running? I guess my concern would be that I don't really wanna see an abandoned building right next to a park.
Right, correct. And to be honest, there are no future plans for that building at this point, so it is remaining operational. That's all I can answer for that.
I'm going to leave this on first reading, just to get past the planning commission meeting, which I'll probably attend, and then, we'll see what we do with it at the next meeting.
I think they need it, they need the agreement signed using this section of the revised code along with the petition. So, I mean, but planning, they should have some recommendation out of planning.
Yes, so planning has to have the recommendation at the time that I think we present the annexation to the county. So yes, we have to submit the petition and the annexation agreement at the same time.
Okay, so if you go to planning commission on Wednesday and we come back and approve this in 2 weeks, you'll still have the petition and the information for planning to send to. Okay, then that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do.
So, are you telegraphing council that they should be prepared to vote on it on September 5th?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm saying that, yeah, we should be ready to vote yea or nay at the next meeting.
Yeah, well, I always like bringing in commercial development.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we'll consider resolution number 2017-37 as having its first reading. We appreciate you taking the time and coming to answer our questions. If you have any further questions, probably direct them to our law director, Ms. Applebaum, and thank you for coming. You don't have to remain for the rest of the council. We won't hold you hostage.
Thank you very much for being here. Thanks for answering all the questions, appreciate that.
Now we'll be looking at ordinance number 2017-24. It will be presented by Ms. Knappich. It's the Ms. Barbara Knappich show. I'm looking for Mr. Greenjean now. If you would, please, Mr. Paulo, read the title.
Ordinance number 2017-24. An ordinance amending Part 9 of the codified ordinances of the City of Wooster, Ohio, to provide for amendments and new sections to Chapter 921, Water.
Ms. Knappich, the floor is yours.
Yeah, this is another issue that is being pushed by the federal government, because we are very rarely left to operate on our own, apparently. But this addresses some amendments to Chapter 921, which is the water section for the city. And we're looking to make some changes due to updates in the Ohio EPA regulations and and industry standards. We need to add 2 new sections to Chapter 921, Section 92107, 92108. These are required to address cross-connection, backflow prevention, and private water well issues. The EPA has enacted regulations where we have to have some adequate safety operations put in place for potable water procedures and regulations, and be able to address the backflow issues and cross-connection issues, as well as make sure that the people with private wells comply with this. So, who from the city would like to address this?
See, Mr. Gibbons is hiding in the background,
I thought he was
protected
back there somewhere,
by-
but I can hardly see him.
protected by Lieutenant Nadomo back there, who carries a hog leg, I believe. But I think the spotlight's on you, Mr. Gibbons.
The primary part that we're trying to do here is obviously just protect the water system. Backflow is a big issue. If you watch the news, every once in a while you'll hear about a contamination event that happens in some city. It's always somewhere else. I think the
Flint,
last big one was
Michigan.
in Corpus Christi, Texas. It happened last year. I want to assure you that this is an issue that happens in Worcester. You'll probably barely see this, and I just brought this. This is a sample. See that blue color? This is a clear container. This water was taken out of the drinking fountain, out of a business in Wooster, Ohio. So this does happen here. This was from a faulty backflow that it drained from a cooling tower system that had a dye in it to check for leaks. Well, it not only does that, but apparently it tips you off when your backflow failed. This came directly out of the drinking fountain.
It did not make it into the city's water.
It did not, thank you, it did not make it into the city's water system. It stayed within that building. But that's how important this issue is. It's not some faraway city. This happens in Wooster, Ohio. And this is part of the thing that I show when I give tours at the plant, that people realize how important those devices are and how important it is that we test them annually. That's what the requirement is. And I know that's a kind of a long section that you were given, is 921, a lot of pages with that. And yes, specific questions, I'd be happy to.
That was based on a model ordinance given to us by EPA, correct? Most of what we put into ours was.
And a lot of what we put in there, we checked with other communities around the state just to kind of make sure we're doing things the way we should, and we're pretty consistent across the board with other communities.
Well, if memory serves me correct, it was about 10 years ago, around there was a mandate to put the backflow ordinance in, because I remember being on council when we passed it. So now this is to ramp up the inspection to make catch some of these failures that could have a catastrophic effect on the entire city's water system. Is that one of the purposes here? Yes, no?
Well, the state actually put in, I think, their initial cross connection, or at least their last big update was in '95, so it's been on the books quite a while.
I just remember there was another one that came down the pike here within the last 12 years. Mr. Albright?
Yes, could you give us a summary of the private well issue now that this strengthens the control of that?
It doesn't come up very often, but there are some houses in certain areas of town that have kept their private well and also hooked onto the water system, which we don't allow. Typically, we want those people to abandon those wells and prove to us that they've been abandoned, just so we don't get into a situation where we could get backflow from the private well into the public water system.
I know at one time a resident across from where my mother lived had right in the middle of the city, had a private well, and they used it for an in-ground sprinkler system. So that's why sometimes people maintained it. And if all the plumbing's still connected, you could have a problem if they apply a chemical fertilizer, liquid fertilizer, that could get sucked into the entire water system. Mr. Sylvester.
From your response, though, it sounded like it's something the city doesn't like to see, period. And according to section 921.08, when I read through the legislation, it says that any property that's served with city water shall not also be served by a private water well unless the water service properly designed to comply with the city's cross-connection backflow prevention requirements, including installation of approved backflow assembly, et cetera, et cetera. So is that how the legislation is going to remain? I wasn't clear because often we have, I know there were parts in blue, but that was just the sections. Often we have green and red to show what's being changed. Is that how the legislation will stand with the passage of this piece?
Yes.
Okay. I guess for me, for someone to keep their well, to water plants and those types of things, if it's completely separate from the city water system, I didn't feel that was, even according to the legislation, that was any kind of a problem. But I want to make sure I understand.
If it is completely separate, that would be a good thing. Where we have concern is if those two were feeding the same residential dwelling. If the average person is not going to want to put in a testable backflow device and have it tested every year. But if they do keep a separate, let's say they put all their outside spigots on their well and everything else in their house is separate, that would probably be fine.
The problem is, we've had people that have both going into their house, and we can go in and witness them disconnected, and then when we leave, they hook them back up together again. And we don't know that. There's no way for us to know, or another person could buy the property and do that after the fact. We won't know that unless they were to come and get a building permit or plumbing permit, which, when they're doing that, that's how we don't catch those.
I guess, go ahead, Ramsey.
In the section 921.07, where it talks about cross-connection and backflow, it just states that in the judgment of the utility manager, which I presume is you, if a backflow prevention assembly is required, just kind of, it says in your judgment, does that mean you could judge that every dwelling needs one in the city of Worcester, then it would be required? It says at the owner's expense to install that device. So what guideline would you use?
That is actually the way that Ohio Revised Code is written.
Okay.
It puts that responsibility on the water purveyor. In this case, it would be me.
It's already in there. We're just adopting what we have to enforce anyway.
His name is on our permit that, to operate a public water system. He's responsible
Yeah, I was
for
just
it.
clarifying that that is your responsibility.
I also do have a question. I know that we took the language from the EPA, but I just want to be consistent. This is my legal mind here. I just want to be consistent on how we are identifying the people who are going to be held responsible. And in that particular section, 921.07A, we talk about giving notice to the water consumer to install such an approved assembly. Would that be, what if it was a rental situation? And would the water consumer be identified as the rentor, or would it be identified as the property owner? And maybe we should make it more specific as to property owner. I'm assuming it would be the property owner.
Correct.
Of the notices that I've sent out so far, each one has gone to the property owner, whether they are local or not.
Right. I just don't want there to be any confusion down the road that having a property owner come back and say, changes legislation to say the water consumer, I'm not consuming the water there. And I just want to make sure that we're very clear on our language, that who's responsible. Any other questions, or?
Are you suggesting an amendment to?
I
as far
would
as the wording?
suggest that the amendment, as opposed to using the term in, and I think that was the only place I caught it, 921.07A be from the designation of the term water consumer, and I think it's used twice in that section, right? And that be amended to read the property owner.
I would suggest, if I may weigh in, water consumer and/or property owner, because you have some of these, especially corporations, which might have a long-term lease on the property. There's the ones that are going to have the vested interest in terms of the water and plumbing works within that business.
That's a good point. So yeah, I would suggest amending it.
Water consumer and/or?
And water consumer and or property owner.
Yeah.
To go back, if I may, for a moment to the private wells, your goal, I would assume, is that private wells disappear, that they're abandoned. Is that right?
If they are getting service from the city, my preference would be that they are abandoned, although I know people have an investment in those wells and would like to use them and, for watering purposes, outdoor, irrigation. I mean, I understand that, and like again, my preference is they be eliminated, but that probably isn't going to happen in every case. But the goal is to keep them totally separate from our system.
You know where some of them exist. Do you know where all of them exist?
I don't know how I could.
Is there any inspection from time to time? As to, you mentioned before, there's always the possibility where if they are inspected, when they leave, they're connected.
That could happen, and I think that's more of a residential setting. I don't see that happening on a commercial business.
Okay.
Most of the inspections we do, though, I will tell you, are in commercial buildings because we have access to them. And we'll do that. There's many reasons. We'll go in and check for just a meter, if there's a meter issue, a transmitter issue for the meter. We want to check, there's certain businesses that have bypasses around their meter because by code, they need them if they're a medical facility. But that's part of the reasons we can get into those places. I mean, we're not going to go and knock on every door and say, hey, we want to see your meter.
But you have replaced the meters over the years. And when you did you take the opportunity to check to see if there is a private well and make note of that? I mean, that was one opportunity you had to get in the cellar.
Right. But also, if someone is going in and changing a meter or putting in a transmitter, they also have to know what to look for. Because, when you go in your basement and look for your plumbing, you might not be able to tell right away even where that pipe's coming into the building, let alone the city feed and a feed from a private well. It would be difficult if you did not know to look for it there, that you would go and find that.
Just one more question. Is there a possibility, I mean, let's back up a minute. Have you had cases where people, your staff went in to replace a meter and discovered a private well that you didn't know about beforehand?
Typically, what happens, John, is they are getting the water service from the city. For some reason, they were on a well before, and now they're getting a water lateral to their house, which requires a permit. So inspectors are in there, and they're looking for a well. We've had many wells abandoned. There's a permit for that from Wayne County. But in the case where they want to keep their well, we make sure it's disconnected from the city system, and then they have to have a higher quality backflow device. Residences are not required to have a true backflow device. So we make them put in what's called a RP, or reduced pressure type of backflow device. They're used in a more hazardous situation. And then that device is required to be tested every year. And so we do know where a lot of them are because we have these testable backflow devices. Usually if someone has a pool or an irrigation system or a well, they will have a testable backflow device.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, circumstances such as our own city engineer, if he kept his well and it was still somewhere connected into the existing system, that E. coli bacteria could get into our entire water system. So there's a circumstances where it's good to say, no well, no connections, that's it.
I've got another couple of things. One is on 921.07E. We talk about after the utilities manager of the city of Worcester is hereby authorized and directed to discontinue after reasonable notice to the occupant the water service to any property, and I think that's excellent, of course. But I'd also like to add to the occupant and the property owner in case they're not one and the same. That way, the property owner can get moving on any repairs or replacements they need to make right away. So maybe it would get more attention if the city contacts them than if the resident contacts them. And we'd hate to see somebody without water because their property owner didn't take care of things. And then I just had one other question. I'm assuming you have some type of standards, some type of criteria that you use that, you can, that it probably comes from the EPA as well, for establishing what, or approving the prevention assembly. Are there specific standard backflow prevention assemblies, and people have to use those specific things?
These are in state law and in the plumbing code, and it identifies the hazard category and the rank from low hazard to high, different devices for different hazards. And a few years ago, the city went to an online monitoring system for all of these testable devices. So there are thousands of devices that are registered online. And so backflow testers, their equipment has to be calibrated every year. They have to have a license. Their equipment has to be licensed. And they will test that backflow device, and then they'll enter all that data in a system online. We monitor that. If they're behind their test, we send them notices. And one of the things that you'll notice in reading through the ordinance, it does give us a little more teeth on the enforcement end when someone fails to do their testing or installation of a device.
Excellent.
When those questions come up, because a lot of times I will get that call, typically I'll refer that to Scott Davis, the city's plumbing inspector. He's much better versed in plumbing code and in the backflow devices than I am. So, we work with his department a lot just for that reason.
Okay, great. Any other questions, concerns?
I was just reading 92106C. Whenever a break or leak occurs, private water main or in the portion of the water service line between the curb stop and the premises supply. City may elect to recover costs incurred for the estimated water loss due to break or leak. And costs incurred for the, I can see the repair cost being borne by the property owner, but the water, you know, sometimes you may not even know. How would you know?
Oh, they contact you right away. I had my water heater fail, and I had a phone call within hours that I had excess water.
I mean, are we talking catastrophic? Is it like thousands and thousands of dollars?
This is on the private portion, their portion of the service.
I understand that, but I mean, if they don't know that it's leaking, you know, how would they know? I mean, they're just property owners, they don't know anything about it.
I think the intent there was to expedite the process. We don't want to notify someone and let them wait 6 months to make the repair, because that entire time, we're losing water that they are not getting billed for.
Right.
So it gives us and the property owner a little more incentive to get that repair fixed in a timely manner. I think right now, we notify and give them, it's either 45 days, I believe, to get the repair done. And that's from the time we find it and we notify them.
No, I was under the understanding if it breaks, you just shut it off and learn to repair it right
The
there.
only time we're gonna shut somebody off for a private leak on a private system like that is if it's causing property damage somewhere else. You know, if it's flooding the street and if it's in the winter, it's creating hazardous condition on the road, obviously we don't want that to continue.
Right.
So in situations like that, but I mean, we're not gonna just arbitrarily shut someone off because their line is leaking and they're losing 2 gallons a minute. It's gonna be something pretty catastrophic and something that we're losing a lot of water on.
Okay, so they're gonna be notified fairly quickly if they do have leak and it's not.
As soon as we find it, they'll get a letter within a few days.
Okay.
Mr. Myers has asked to leave this on first reading.
Oh, yeah, I was just asking, there seems like there's a lot of questions, and this would give the opportunity for people to reach out to our utilities manager to get any verifications outside of the public meeting. And unless there's any pressing need to pass it this evening that you're aware of, I think we'll give everybody time to reach out to you directly and get any clarification. I think you did a great job, by the way.
We'll leave this on first reading with the hopes that any answers can be, any questions can be answered by the next meeting, and we can expect to vote on it at the next meeting.
Okay, ordinance number 2017-24 has had its first reading. That brings us to the last piece of legislation for this evening. It's going to be presented by Mr. Ansel. As part and parcel of this will be a presentation by Mr. Monet, Building Standards Manager, who's here. I asked that it be included in this portion rather than presentation at the beginning of the meeting, because it seems to have fit in better than, and we'll probably, after we get done with the ordinance, have questions anyway, so we might as well have those answered while it's fresh in our mind. So if you would, Mr. Paulo, one last time, read a title of an ordinance, number 2017-25.
Ordinance number 2017-25, an ordinance amending the annual appropriation ordinance.
It is slated for 3 readings. Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very straightforward summary. I am going to turn the floor over to Tim Monet to talk a little bit about his presentation that justifies the request for additional funding from our unappropriated balances in our general fund to the Building Standards Division. 10 blighted houses have been identified. They've been summarized to council with pictorial depictions of the state of disrepair and blight that these abandoned properties represent and the negative effects associated with having those properties in existing neighborhood is certainly very compelling. We have to address these. They are public safety hazards and also, areas for criminal activity and, again, negative impact to those neighbors adjacent to these properties because there's things that they can't control that impact the quality of their personal investment in their residential properties. There are 5 houses being requested for expenditures this year for the balance of the year. Then there'll be 5 more additional for next year. We have in the past received some state fundings to offset some of these expenses, but those funds are being depleted annually, and we don't have the monies available to address as systematically as we have before. So it does cause us to go ahead and access some of our unappropriated funds available in the general fund to make these residential neighborhood improvements. So with that, we understand the mechanics. We've done this before. We've received more state funding in the past, but now we're to that point where these are on the radar screen, and we need to get going while we have the available time this year to go in and not incur higher costs for demolition that you will have in the colder winter months and so forth. So we can get started on this very quickly, and I hope, based on Tim's commentary and discussion tonight, we can suspend the rules and move this to 3rd and final reading because it is an emergency. This is a true emergency and we have time available. So with that, I will turn it over to Tim Monet. Please, Tim.
I would just like to say, though, that Mr. Monet has used the money judiciously, unlike the euphemism that was in the paper where he's burned through the money already. He isn't using it indiscriminately. He's been a very good steward of these funds.
Well, I appreciate you leaving a few minutes on the agenda to indulge me. I'll go through quickly. It is important, and I do appreciate the support you've shown through the years for code enforcement. It truly is a quality of life issue, and it really does affect neighbors and neighborhoods, and I think you feel that because you get calls from people, and you really get to see, the frustration they feel and the pain when there's a situation in the neighborhood that they have to deal with. And so I do appreciate that. So if you look at that first picture, you can see there that property maintenance and zoning code enforcement, they kind of go hand in glove. So through the years, we have used one inspector to enforce the zoning code and the property maintenance code. And so you can see some of the different violations we deal with. On the property maintenance side, it's tall grass, unlicensed inoperable vehicles in the yard, rubbish and debris, flaking, peeling paint. On the zoning side, it's illegal sign complaints, line of sight issues, trash is out early, parking in the lawn. It's also high grass is also a zoning code violations. And so you can see the percent of what we deal with there. If you look at the second picture, it kind of gives you a little bit of an update on a newer program that you'll recall we instituted in 2013. We call it the RT Periodic Inspection Program. And you can see in 2016, we did nearly 1,600 inspections under that program. So if you recall, the RT district is that traditional residential district that surrounds the downtown. Has about 1,760 parcels in there. Most of those houses are pre-1935. They need a lot of maintenance. They need a lot of work on those houses. So we make an inspection from the exterior, from the right-of-way. We also do get in the houses when it's necessary, and we've been in quite a few of those houses. So we're now 3 years into that program. So we've been in a lot of those houses, or we've inspected a lot of those houses 2 times. We haven't been all the way through that district twice, but a good part of it. We still respond to complaints in other parts of the city. We're not just inspecting in the RT district, but the bulk of our focus is in the RT district. So it's presented us with a problem. We've really ratcheted up the inspections we've made in that area, But the problem that it's created is we've really found a lot of these houses that were in very bad shape, very deteriorated. And so since 2014, when we've had more of these inspections, remember that's when Mr. Reed was hired. We had some cutbacks prior to that, so we went a number of years without a property maintenance inspector. But since then, we've seen a lot of these houses. So we have about 10 houses, as was mentioned, and it's a real problem in the city. Some of the problems highlighted is reduced property values, increased crime, increased risk to health and welfare. You do have arson in those houses, you have drug activity in those houses, you have people squatting in those houses, and ultimately you have increased costs, as Mr. Ansel mentioned, to the city. So something has to be done. So if you see at the top of the third page there, since 2012 to current, we have demolished about 50 houses. Think about it, that's about 10 houses a year. It's a lot of houses. Now, as was mentioned, we did use some Moving Ohio Forward money, if you remember that, and that was the money that the state of Ohio received as part of a settlement with the largest lenders who were at fault with a lot of these loans that they made with these houses. So they gave a large settlement to the state of Ohio, and I think the city of Worcester's ultimate share of that money was about just south of $200,000. So we used that for quite a few demolitions. General fund money's been used. In some cases, the owners paid for their own demolitions. And if you remember, we did the Larwell Trailer Park cleanup. There were some other initiatives as well. But it's, there's been a lot of progress made in the RT district. And I think just about anyone spend some time driving around and looking will see there's a real difference been made. So generally, we budget about $20,000 for that. We've already demolished 2 houses this year. We had a lot more grass mowing that we did this year. So we literally have no money left in that line item, and really in our budget at all. We've shifted money around to even do more mowing, but we're really at the end of what we can do. So these 10 houses, they represent some of the worst houses in the city. And you'll read from time to time articles in the paper about some of these houses. They've been on social media, some people writing about these houses, and they're a problem. It costs about $15,000 to demolish a house, generally speaking. So you see there were your pictures of the houses, that Lucas Street house. I think you've probably been following that in the paper. Houses that had a lot of cats were in there, and so cats were taken out of the house. The house is in absolutely deplorable conditions. There's it's infested with insects. We're going to have to treat that house, but neighbors have to put up with that. So I think, that is an emergency, genuinely. So we'd like to take that house down. We have about 5 houses that we've done all of the legal work, all the things necessary that we really can move on pretty quickly. 5 other houses, a total of 10, have been condemned, but there's 5 that we're really ready to move on. The house there, 148 Bell Avenue, probably most of you have seen that house, fire damaged, so we're working to take that house down. It's been a problem property for many years. And North Street, see the one on South Street, these are vacant, abandoned houses. I believe 3 of these houses, they've basically been abandoned to an estate. No one's taking responsibility for them. There's no one to hold accountable, really, because there's no money in the estate, there's no money there, nobody's going to tear it down, it's been sitting there. I know in the case of the one house on Bell, it's been in that situation, or I'm sorry, on Bowman, it's been in that situation for quite some time. The one on Columbus is boarded up. Front door gets broken in from time to time. People go in that house, we board it back up. It's been a problem. Henry, Grant, Bowman. So if the money is appropriated, we're going to prioritize to the 5 worst houses that need to come down. Andre tells me that's a little bit more than 1 day of cash. I realize everything we do is important with the money, but I think this is very important for the community.
Thank you, Tim.
Tim, I want to congratulate you and your staff for the job that you have done, you and your staff. And, you know, we've been at this for quite some time. We used to take our little tours, and Mark and Mindy and others before them, and we were strapped for money and a method to do it. And the thing that you need to be credited for is that these are not questionable. These are absolute, need to be torn down. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have gone the full route of trying to work with people if there's people still living in these homes, but these are what they say, vacant, abandoned, not fit for human habitation. So I want to applaud you and your staff for what you've been doing over the last several years. I mean, like you said before, all you have to do is drive around, put in the RT, and it makes sense that those homes are the oldest. And the older a home gets, the more difficult it is to maintain. I think we all that are homeowners realize that. So, thank you.
Ms. Knappich.
One of the other things that I'd like to mention, and you have done a really great job, and since we had the tax increase, you've used the money that we brought in very, very well and very efficiently and been able to do a lot. But I think that I can't underscore enough to council and to the public how important this is to get rid of these abandoned buildings. Having been on the opiate task force since it began, you know, you're not only finding homeless people squatting there, which is sad enough, but what you're seeing is a lot of the drug activity is in the community is done in these vacant houses. And having these vacant houses out there as an open invitation to drug dealers and drug addicts to come in and use them for flop houses and drug houses only makes it more difficult on the neighborhood, and certainly more difficult on the police department, and more difficult on the fire department. They have Narcan calls out there, emergency calls to these places. The sooner we can get these things taken down, the better off it will be for that situation, in addition just to the overall health of the neighborhoods. So I have no problem asking or voting for more money. In fact, as many of these as we can get down, and the fewer places we have for people to go and do drugs, the better off the city of Worcester will be.
Thank you, Ms. Knappich. Mr. Cavan?
Yes, thank you. I think we've made great gains in our efforts to rid the city of the blighted parts. Sometimes, as I've said before, you know, it's addition by subtraction. But, you know, at this point, I don't think it's an elective situation or it's optional. I think it's a responsibility that we owe to our citizens. And so far, I'm very pleased by the efforts. Thank you.
Mr. Myers?
Just clarify, you mentioned the ownership situation. I mean, is there any recourse, do you know who is on the tax records? I mean, I imagine you've tried to reach out to somebody, but I'm sure you've done your due diligence. Sure. I'm just curious about the name of it in general, other than the estate situation, are there individuals or people that we're gonna assess and hopefully try to recover our funds?
Yeah, we have to do a lien letter, so we're doing title search, notifying all of the people who have an interest in that property and notifying them. And ultimately, if no one will take responsibility and we tear it down, we're going to certify those costs to the auditor for assessment.
Okay.
And it'll sit out there as an assessment, but you know, it's never going to be paid in all likelihood. And sometimes we try to do other things and work with the owner to take it down themselves, and other creative things.
Okay, I knew you had done all that. I just was wondering how that worked in the process. Thank you.
And there have been some people that have purchased the abandoned properties for lesser than the real estate property tax. The county will give a discount if it's reasonable and incurred cost and done the demolitions and then have taken that to extend their personal property. So it's a good investment if the people have the funds to be able to do that. Many don't, some do. But as Mr. Monet highlighted, the tax lien is just going to be added on top of the past due taxes owed on that property. And hopefully someone at some future point will come in and show an interest. And if it's 50% of something, it's better than 50% of nothing. So there are some upsides in certain scenarios of people expanding their personal properties with the adjacent property created by the demolition. So I'm sensing a consensus opinion that this is a priority. We do have funds available. Mr. Albright, did you have an additional comment?
I was just going to say, when we talk about rainy day funds, let's have them, I look at it in a very broad way. To me, this is a rainy day situation that needs to be dealt with. Not every rainy day actually means a physical storm. In a way, this is a storm on quality of life, as you mentioned earlier. So I have no problem.
They're very controlled in, maintained fashion. They're going at a budgetary number that is manageable. They've identified the worst of the worst, and I think it's a good ongoing program to clean up these scourges, these scourge properties within neighborhoods. And one thing for sure, the neighbors in those areas really appreciate the city investing on improving the overall quality of life in their neighborhood, because that's the most valuable asset that they have as residents, is their home and property. So thank you for your lively discussion. Tim, to you and your team, thank you very much. Keep up the great work. So without further ado, I would motion to suspend the rules and move ordinance 2017-25 to third and final reading this evening.
Motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Ansel, second by Mr. Myers. Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Albright?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Cavan?
Yes.
Knappich?
Yes.
Myers?
Rules are suspended.
Motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt. Is there a second? Mr. Albright, any further discussion? If not, I just want to say I agree with Mr. Cavan. We not only have a duty, but we have an obligation. When a person moves in the city, they make a compact with that community. They'll pay taxes, and then in exchange, they expect to be protected, and it's beyond fire and police protection. It's to be safe in their own neighborhoods. And these blighted houses are safety concerns in so many ways, many highlighted by Ms. Knappich. And some people might say, oh, we shouldn't be spending our taxpayer dollars for this type of thing. Well, this is exactly why you live in a community, is you expect the community as a collective to take care of things like that. Otherwise, there's no purpose to live in a city or a municipality. So I think these are well-spent taxpayer dollars to making the city safe. There was a motion to and seconded to pass the ordinance. Would you call the roll on that, please?
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Albright?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Cavan?
Yes.
Knappich?
Yes.
And Myers?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2017-25 passes. And because we had nothing else to do, Mr. Montgomery wanted to have an executive session. So in order to go in executive session, I'm going to need to have someone make a motion. Yeah, it's to discuss possible purchase of property and discuss possible legal issues, or at least that's what it says on my agenda. So a motion by Mr. Ansel to go in executive session, second by Mr. Myers. Would you please call the roll on the motion to go into executive session?
Silvestri?
Yes.
Albright?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Cavan?
Yes.
Knappich,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
and Sanders.
Yes.
All right, we are now going into executive session, so we'll be off the record here. You know how long this is gonna take?
Like this happens to me.